play. And another foul on board. His third for setting a screen.
Because of physical play, although Jordan Taylor just got caught with a moving screen.
Pick and roll. And a foul. Offensive foul coming up. Ken Valentine standing right there.
Izzo dying for a moving screen.
Well, this is short turnaround. Hi, Dylan. How are you?
Quite an eventful Tuesday.
Good to see you again.
We're back.
We are back. When did we finish our last recording?
Not very long ago.
Noon?
Let's see.
Less than that? Earlier than that?
Yeah, posted the podcast at 12:11. Now we're back at 5:03.
With some news. Nojel Eastern headed to Michigan.
Nothing brings out news like us recording a podcast.
What do you think it's going to be tonight?
Hopefully we can just sleep and not have to worry about anything, but we'll see.
I don't know.
You never know.
We'll
Transfer
see.
waiver wire never stops.
But yes, anyone listening to this probably is well aware. The news of the day, Nojel Eastern of Purdue headed to Michigan as a transfer. One of the, I'll say, certainly one of the bigger surprises of the entire offseason in college basketball. I don't know if it's one of the most impactful moves, right? But I would certainly say it's one of the more surprising things that you will find out there. Fair to say.
It's not every day that you have a guy who you expect to be a senior returning point guard, multi-year starter on your roster on Wednesday, and then he's on another Big Ten team's roster on Thursday.
Right.
Doesn't happen very often. For Michigan fans, it's always happened the other way with
True.
Big Ten transfers leaving.
True.
So other side of the coin here, but
what a time to be alive. So, all right, let's get into this thing. First of all, I have a story on The Athletic about this, and kind of all places to go prove himself. It's very interesting. A guy with a lot to prove, Nojel Eastern. Very interesting and very curious that it will be at Michigan. You, of course, put together a great piece, really looking at the fit. You have some video included. It always annoys me when there's breaking news, how quickly you're able to get film cut up. It in the time it takes you to do one of those, I am would still be searching on a page trying to find the clip that I want. And you produce 3 of them. You got charts, shot charts, graphs.
Shit, what I kind of do, man. Gotta stay on brand.
It's the deal, man. You got ball screen video. You got his jump shooting video, or I put that in quotes. You got video of his defense, which is obviously the selling point. So great piece. Now available on Hoops. Go check that out. Subscribe there. Subscribe to The Athletic. All right. First things first, Dylan. Let's talk when we might actually see him play is probably the first thing before we really get into his game. I'd say the most pressing things that fans probably want to hear about is when might he actually be on the court and how might this transpire. As of now, 5 o'clock Thursday, Michigan has not formally confirmed that Nojel Eastern's transferring to Michigan, right? We are not positive of whether he is going to Michigan as a sit-out transfer. Per the rules, he would have to sit out for 1 season.
He's listed as a standard transfer in the portal, correct?
Correct. So, in order for him to play next year, he would either need a waiver, probably a hardship waiver of some kind, or find a way to graduate and be a graduate transfer. So if he's only a couple classes short and can finish it up this summer, maybe that's a way. For what it's worth, I double-checked this earlier today because I was unsure how this worked. If you go to a school and, say, finish in the first semester, finish your degree, right? Say you're 4 credits short and you knock that out in the first semester, that does not make you eligible for the second.
To grad transfer mid-season.
Correct. You wouldn't gain eligibility at the mid-season point. It's for the year. So it's either would have to be this offseason or not at all, obviously. So we are not exactly sure what they are intending to attempt to do. This is me guessing, and now I texted Nojel Eastern. I texted his mother. I have not heard anything back. Nothing formal from Michigan. My guess is, considering this is a guy who has declared for the draft twice, has played premium playing time for the last 2 years of his college basketball career, I would be surprised if Nojel Eastern is willingly transferring right now with the mindset of I'm sitting out next year. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, he's never seemed like a guy who wants to take his time as far as kind of his growth curve and development. Seems like a situation where the idea would be to get on the court as soon as possible. Obviously, most transfers feel that way. Not all transfers end up being eligible. I guess thinking about it, I hadn't really thought about this, but there's probably some complication as far as when he's announced and how he's announced based on whether he's trying to finish credits or not, I would assume at the same point. So I guess we'll see how it all plays out. The waiver vote is supposed to be, 6 days away next week? Is that correct?
Yeah.
May 20th. Yeah. So there's a lot of moving pieces. It seems like a situation where he would want to just finish his college career and play right away. I agree with you there. Yeah. What do you think from a Michigan point of view would be better? Because I can convince myself either option pretty quickly.
Me personally, I think for Michigan, the optimal would be that he sits this year and you get him in 2021-22 on a roster that will be extremely depleted. At that point, you'll definitely be without Livers if you're not without him this year. You'll probably be saying goodbye to Franz Wagner. Eli Brooks will be moving on. Mike Smith will be moving on. You'll have a roster that is lacking game experience at the college level. If you could have a guy who's played 3 years of Big Ten basketball step onto the court for that team, I definitely think that would be... I don't see really what he brings, anything that changes the game for this year. Obviously, his defense is his defense, and it would be useful, and he will play if he's on the court this year. I think he'd be more valuable, though, to the 21-22 team.
Yeah, so I go back and forth. His defense is an immediate impact to this Michigan roster and what it needs, right? Like, this is not going to be a good perimeter defensive team, and he's one of the best defenders in the Big Ten. So that fits nicely, I think. I mean, Eli Brooks, we talked about his defense a lot. He's not that elite one-on-one defender that Eastern can be. Mike Smith going to be a defensive concern there. A lot of freshmen. You don't have mobile bigs who can really defend particularly well. None of your big men are known for their defense. So on that side, like, maybe it makes sense to just get him as soon as possible and bolster the backcourt does need another player, right? And then I go back and forth where the best way to use Nojel Eastern, I think, is to give him the ball and surround him with shooters. Yeah. I think that's the best way to negate the fact that he can't really make shots. So in that sense, if you can have Franz Wagner, Isaiah Livers,
you
Eli
might be
Brooks,
talking me out of my take now. Okay.
If you can put those guys around him,
yeah,
then that might be the best case scenario for him. On the other side, you have no idea who's going to be next to him on the roster the following year. So it's really just dependent on who those guys are. And we saw Nojel Eastern this year with Nojel Eastern and a lot of guys who just weren't very good offensively, and he couldn't really carry that team. So maybe if you have some better pieces as far as shooters that Michigan might have those shooters in 21-22, but we don't know who's. I mean, they're going to be a lot of freshmen, like you said. So that's where I go back and forth on which would be a better case from Michigan's point of view.
Yeah, I mean, you could certainly make the case, like, if you have someone else sitting out, like, say, Chaundi Brown comes aboard, right, and he's a sit-out guy. Okay, not burn him. That's not the right way of putting it, but use Nojel now, bolster that roster, try to get as much success this year while you still have Franz Wagner, while you still have potentially Isaiah Livers. You could certainly make that case. Because you're right. It's not like if that roster is that depleted and he's playing in 21-22.
He's not going to carry the offense.
He's not going to carry the offense, no.
But he could facilitate an offense with good players around him.
Sure. And we both also know that roster currently has 5 openings and will have more than that. So who knows actually what's around him on that team, right? We're just talking in present day. It'll be a completely
blank.
conversation.
It could be 3 McDonald's All-Americans. It could be 3 grad transfers. We have
that's the scenario that I imagine it being is right. A transfer and a couple more freshmen, and then the sophomores or the guys who will be freshmen this year being sophomores next year, where it would be really helpful to have a guy who's played, right? And you can put the ball in his hands, you can play through him, and kind of, bridge the gap of losing all this experience over this 2-year window, right? Because it's not only what you'll lose next year, it's this year's too, with losing Xavier Simpson and John Teskey.
Yeah, and all that, I understand the idea of bringing in a sit-out guy, and that makes sense. I just go back and forth if he's the right guy for that. And at the same point, like, he could develop a lot. There are holes in his game that he could obviously work on and could benefit from a sit-out year. I don't think that's crazy either. So we probably just are going to be in a holding pattern to figure out.
Right.
Does he apply for the waiver? Does he get the waiver? What's the claim for the waiver? How does the NCAA vote? Does he withdraw from the NBA draft? So there's still a lot of chips down to be played out there in that regard.
Yeah. And because if it's a waiver, what's the case? There are...
What's anyone's waiver case at this point?
Yeah, though? I mean, but right up the road, Joey Hauser put together a relatively reasonable case from what I know what was in there that they went back and forth with 3 or 4 times in appeal, and he still did not get it.
And that dragged on into the season, right?
Yes.
That's a tricky spot.
Mm-hmm. And by the way, what are you drinking over there? It's mid-afternoon, so we're both cracking beverages here.
I'm drinking a Jackie O's Fluid Forms, a hazy double IPA. Pretty good.
There you go.
What do you got there?
I got some Journeyman bourbon.
Okay.
Yeah. Nice and smooth. Okay, let's talk about Nojel's game.
I just want to say one more thing on the waiver.
Yes.
I think we can probably assume that Matt Painter's not going to go ahead and back that waiver, like some coaches might prefer to do.
No. We'll get into the Painter-Juwan dynamic, I think, on the back end here, because that's by far the most fun part of the conversation. I want to be like halfway through.
Our drinks
We're mostly done this bourbon before we talk about that. So his game, right? The second he commits, it's just a stream of memes and gifs of Aziz airballing a free throw, or what's his name throwing up a brick, and I get it. The shooting, it's almost annoying how much his bad offense detracts and distracts from his defense and some of the stuff that he does do. Like, he's a good player on a good team if there's guys around him, right? But just the offense is just so woefully lacking that it just overwhelms like a scouting report.
Yeah. So my immediate reaction is he's probably immediately the toughest guy on Michigan's roster, strongest, most physical player. I mean, he broke Eli Brooks' nose by accident last year, right? So he gives you that element of toughness, of defense.
Austin Davis is going to protest that claim.
What's that?
Austin Davis is going to protest that claim.
All right, well, I'll take Nojel Eastern. He's built like a linebacker, right?
Yes,
for sure. How about?
For sure.
So the defense, that's legitimately valuable.
Mm-hmm.
The offense is a lot to figure out. It felt kind of like as a sophomore, Purdue had figured out how to make it work. and then you could build off that. And as a junior, he was going to be more of a distributor, a point guard. And Purdue's offense, it wasn't just Nojel Eastern. The whole thing just never worked this year, right? So that's where I start. And obviously the fact that the offense tanked coincided with him playing a slightly bigger role, having the ball more often, whatever else. I think the shot is a real concern. Like if you take how he scores on Synergy, he comes out as a versatile big man. He's most used play type in the half court is posting up, right? So he defies any sort of positional norm, which is in large part because he can't do things that players who play his position are expected to do, namely make jump shots. Michigan built an entire offense for the last 3 years around a player who, for most of his career, really struggled to make jump shots. I think that's probably a big part of the intrigue. I think without a doubt, I think you have to point out that Purdue's offense was last in the Big Ten in ball screen volume. Michigan was first. I think if anything is going to make Nojel Eastern's offensive game work, it would be as a ball screen point guard with his size and ability to pass. The numbers aren't completely there to say he will be good at it, but they are there to say he hasn't done it or really had the chance to do it. So that's my first reaction to adding him is he ran 66 ball screens last year. Xavier Simpson ran 19 per game. Right. So if he's Michigan's point guard, he's going to sink or swim as a ball screen guy. Yeah. Because I think that's the thing we haven't seen him do, and it's clearly, I think, what he wants to do.
No doubt. So, I mean, look, without having spoken to him, just talking to people around the Purdue program, Nojel was kind of a jack of all trades a little bit in what he was asked to do, right? Okay, number one thing to do, you're going to guard the best player on the other team. And number two, you're just going to do whatever's kind of needed or fill whatever spots needed on offense. He played 1 through 4 basically at different varying times. And I think if he returned to Purdue, yeah, he'd have some time at the 1, but I think it would end up just inevitably him being the 4 at Purdue.
He spent a lot of time dribbling the ball up the court and then playing the 4.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. And I imagine it would have just been more of that. And in his mind, and I think in the minds of the people around him, his ticket is as some kind of point forward guy. And I think he was only transferring to a place that was talking to him about being the point guard.
I think that's probably a safe assumption. Yeah. And I think it's just so important to point out how much differently Purdue plays offensively, right? They run so much through the post and an off-ball movement, off of screens. It's a very effective offense, and Matt Painter's a great offensive coach, just a very different system. Like, I don't think Xavier Simpson would have necessarily been an effective offensive player in that offense because of what's required.
Right.
So I do think you have to account for the fact that he's going to be asked to do something entirely different on offense at Michigan. We don't know how he'll succeed or fail at that.
Yes. And there's also this idea of if he's coming in to be the guy, well, there's other point guards at Michigan. Eli Brooks is still at Michigan. Mike Smith still at Michigan. Zeb Jackson coming to Michigan, right? I know that Nojel Eastern would probably be able to win that job. I'm just saying, though, it's not like he's walking into some place that just has some total vacancy that exists.
Yeah, as a sit-out guy, you might say that he's just the guy. And that could even be a reason why he would buy into being a sit-out guy, because it's just like, hey, that's going to be your team next year, and you could use that kind of pitch. Eli Brooks is not a point guard. And any sort of long-term plan that you're going to build the offense around Eli Brooks as point guard, it's just not really a fit, I don't think. I don't think Eli Brooks is dying to prove that he's a point guard. I think he quite happily played off the ball last year. And when you're going into, let's just say Nojel Eastern would have never gone into a post-game interview and said, well, I'm not really the best ball screen player, so we played differently to win this game without Xavier, right? It's a different mentality, and I think that's fine. The Mike Smith thing's more interesting. They're both suburban Chicago kids. They know each other. They are apparently friendly based on what they've posted on Instagram. So they're going to be in a competition, but there's also probably enough plays and shots to go around from that spot as well.
And it's the matter of, if you have a guy who plays like a 2 but looks like a 1, it's kind of easily masked when you have a 6'7" point guard, right? And you can almost swap. You can have Nojel run the point and have an Eli Brooks or a Mike Smith play as a 2, essentially, on one end, and then flip it around. And look, wherever Eastern plays offensively, it's a moot point on defense. You're just going to stick him on the best
player on the other
team. Best player, right. So, yeah, you can kind of play around a lot with personnel when you have a guy like Eastern.
You can play around a lot defensively, but you're always sort of playing with one hand tied behind your back offensively, given his shot, right?
Well, yeah, but that's the thing. If you have Livers back, okay, and you can put him out there, and it's Brooks or Smith with Livers and Franz, you got enough spacing and 3-point shooting that it won't look like what's the numbers at Purdue? What did they shoot as a team on threes? It was abysmal, right?
33%.
They had one guy
31% in the Big Ten.
They had one guy make over 50 threes on the entire roster. I think it's safe to say Eli, Franz, Isaiah Livers are all making over 50 threes next year.
I think that's that's how I start to talk myself into him making sense for Michigan's roster next year.
I'm seeing it now. I'm seeing it. Yeah, you got me.
Because Franz and Isaiah, to be at their best, need someone to kind of control the offense, right? Like they finish possessions. They don't necessarily create them right now based on where they're at. So I see the intrigue. There's still a long way to go. Like, we can sit here and talk about him as a potential ball screen guy. He hasn't done it.
Right.
I mean, 66 ball screen play. I mean, they scored 19 baskets that he created out of ball screens. That's not a lot, right? So we just don't have the sample size. Clearly, he thinks he's up for that role. And I think there's enough to think that he's intriguing in that role. But I don't know that you can just say, oh, lock him in. He's that guy.
Yeah, he had 85 assists last year. Xavier Simpson had 236. But at the end of the day, you're ripping it up, and it's not going to look like. Part of going through Eastern is you're not going to be running ball screens every time down the court, right? If this is your personnel, you can't play that way. Is there going to be some hybrid version? Certainly. But it ain't going to be roll out the same exact offensive sets as last year and go.
Oh, no. That's not. No, I don't think that at all. I think
even without Nojel Eastern, that wasn't happening, right?
Yeah, you look for ways that you can implement some of that stuff. Mike Smith can play out of ball screens a lot too, and Nojel East maybe playing them together in the backcourt gives you the defense to play Mike Smith more minutes. Like, there's a lot of ways to see it working out together. His assist numbers are way better in transition than in the half court, and that really just speaks to the fact that people played off of him to an obscene degree, right? Like, yes. We talk about people playing off of Xavier Simpson. Some of the clips when you watch Nojel handle the ball, like, he walks into 8-foot little floaters because no one's even really guarding him, and he's going to have to get past that and prove that he can at least just hit the occasional shot or even just take a shot, right? That's the biggest thing. I think the scariest thing about his shooting is that he doesn't take any jump shots hardly.
Yeah.
It's one thing if you're a 25% shooter who still shoots a third of your shots from three-point range. People are going to defend that because you might make them sometimes. Charles Matthews never really became a great shooter at Michigan, but he would shoot, so you had to guard him to shoot. If you're not taking them, man, people are just going to leave you there.
Yeah.
Like we talked about Xavier Simpson having to shoot this year, and that's basically why.
The other thing is the way that he is able to play, athletic. You know, he can go to the basket. He can try to do something against contact, right? Except for the fact that he shot 48% from the free throw line last year. So it's not only do you have no reason to guard him, but if he does by chance get by you, you just foul him.
Yeah, and he also stopped getting fouled because he couldn't make free throws. The previous year, he shot 65% at the line and had the third highest free throw rate in the Big Ten, attempted 100 free throws on the year. Last year, he only shot 33 free throws all season because he was just sort of shook by he kind of had the yips, especially at the free throw line, and those showed up pretty early in the year and never really went away.
What do you think about the general reaction to this edition? It almost seemed like Michigan was being like mocked for it from all sides, and to me, it seemed a little short-sighted, perhaps.
The mocking reaction,
Yes,
or
it's not like he's some bum. I don't care what you say. If you're all defensive team in the Big Ten, I'll take you.
Yeah, the timing of it and the way this week played out, I think, played into it.
Okay.
Like, everyone spent the last 24 hours just burning the kid to the ground, including Matt Painter, right? So everyone had all their Nojel Eastern jokes. They just had to retweet them like an hour later. So I think that was part of it. I think everyone's just sitting at home on Twitter, so they're ready to go with reactions.
And it was so unexpected.
Yeah, we had talked about him and didn't even consider the idea that Michigan would pursue him.
No, yeah, we
recorded a podcast an hour before it happened.
We talked transfer 6 hours ago, and this wasn't even on the table. From what I've been told, Juwan Howard and Nojel Eastern spoke relatively at length last night, and it just picked up a lot of momentum. And by this morning, it was done. So it happened that quickly. The optics of it are not great, though. You know, anyone who wants to throw it out there, be like, Michigan had to have been tampering. I mean, shit, if you announce your transfer on Tuesday and commit to a place on Thursday, it's certainly an easy case to make. I'm not suggesting that that's what happened. I have no idea or no information of that. All I've been told is they talked last night and he committed this morning. The dynamics here, though, are fascinating because, look, a lot of people have a lot of opinions about not only the way Nojel Eastern plays, but about the way Nojel Eastern looks at himself. Talking about a guy who's scored how many career points? Very few. Let's see, just for the sake of being able to actually present information. He was, first of all, he's the 8th leading scorer on the team last year. And he has scored 528 career points in 3 years of college basketball. That's not an NBA basketball player by any means, and yet he has declared for the draft twice. Obviously, people point to the mother, right? And apparently active on social media or active on message boards, or I don't know. But it's something that just pops up everywhere, and I don't know her at all. I have nothing disparaging to say. I'm just saying what is the talking points here. The fact that this is a guy, though, this is the great experiment of what we think of when we think of Juwan Howard as a head basketball coach in college, right? Like, I feel like this is a fascinating experiment where you get a guy where if a dude like Nojel Eastern needs perspective on who he is as a basketball player and what his potential is, if you're not going to listen to Juwan Howard, I don't know who you're listening to, right? And that's not to talk shit on Matt Painter. Matt Painter's not only a badass coach, but he played. But like this idea that Juwan Howard can connect with kids, right? All these talking points about him as a head coach. This will be interesting. How he handles Nojel, how Nojel responds to him, and so on and so forth. Does that make sense?
So, to be fair, I don't think anyone's really disparaged Nojel or like talked poorly about him as a teammate. I mean, maybe I need to read more of what Matt Painter said, but I mean, that doesn't seem to be a thing, right? Do you agree with that or not?
Well, I mean, I think I'm more responding to what my mentions were today about, this guy has an inflated view of his own game. And
sure,
by actions, yes.
Because he declared for the draft.
That's the case. At the same time,
people
all I've heard about him as a kid is that he's good kid, never been a problem. Academics are good. Did a lot of work in the community. I've been in press conferences with him and always been really impressed. Like, he gives very thoughtful answers and kind of will explain things. He actually talks a little bit like Matt Painter, believe it or not, in terms of answering questions in press conferences. So I've always been impressed by him. But
Michigan's last staff recruited him, offered him.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I just think some of that, the different pressures that are on the kid to declare for the NBA draft or anything else, it doesn't mean that he's a cocky player. I don't think I've never looked at him and thinks he plays cocky or anything like that, right?
Yeah, I mean, if anything,
he plays his ass off. He plays defense. He's tough as nails.
I agree. And if he were a player like that, he would have taken more than 7 3-pointers the last 2 years, right? He would have forced things to try to prove that he's something that wasn't there.
Yeah, so I just think that whole idea of, well, he thinks he's so good can get kind of convoluted, right? It's not like he's this shot-jacking kid who's going around loafing it on defense.
I probably worded that poorly.
But the narrative is very out there, right? He did declare for the NBA draft twice, and he's not a double-digit scorer in the Big Ten. Matt Painter said as much. He has interesting tools. He's been a top 50 recruit for most, when he was in high school. So he's obviously thought of himself in that light. It hasn't really come together. And honestly, this year, I thought he was almost on the edge of a breakthrough before the season started, right? You thought maybe he can be, because his sophomore year was a step in the right direction, and this year was kind of a step back. So the reaction, everything else, I just don't think, it's not like he's a problem. You're talking about Juwan Howard having to get through to him. I think he seemed coachable on the court. That's all I want to point out.
Right. No, I agree. That's fair. So let's talk Matt Painter and Juwan Howard. From what I know as of 5:30 on Thursday, I am currently under the impression that they have not spoken yet about this. I've not been told of any courtesy call or question call right between the two or anything like that. Doesn't mean it doesn't happen. I'm just telling you, I don't know if they've spoken, but they're going to talk at some point, I would imagine. And this is really interesting because Matt Painter was hot about this transfer situation from Purdue. I think it was one thing for him to declare for the draft. It was another thing for him and Matt Harms to leave. And the two of them doing it simultaneously obviously compounded things, I think, in terms of his reaction to it. But
they left a month apart.
Yeah, but they still left.
Okay.
You still lost 2 players. Doesn't matter if it's in a month or in 4 months.
Okay.
I'm just saying in terms of his reaction to it. So, I mean, look, we talked at length about Painter's comments this morning, or on the morning pod, I should say, since we're now 2 shows a day.
I have a hard time feeling bad for someone who's going to come out so anti-transfer. I mean, Beeline kind of ran into this a lot too.
Uh-huh.
You come out looking like it's hard to feel sorry for you when you're going to say, "Oh, I don't want this kid to transfer in the Big Ten." Well, just let the kid transfer he wants, right? Matt Painter took Spike Albrecht from Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, Spike didn't really have the option to come back to Michigan, but there wasn't a big I don't know. Painter's been anti-transfer waiver for publicly all summer, right?
Yeah.
Before any of his kids transferred. So to be fair to him, it's not a Matt Harms and Nojel Eastern thing. It's I don't think kids should be able to transfer without sitting out. But still, do you think that his sort of fit of rage had anything to do with the fact that he thought he might be going in the Big Ten when he made all those comments yesterday? Or do you think it was just the general gist of the whole thing?
I have no idea. I mean, it would be total guesswork. I would say that I don't have reason to believe that he knew Eastern was going to Michigan when he made those comments yesterday. Frankly, if he was going to Michigan, if he knew that, I think the comments would have been different.
Interesting.
I mean, shit, by the time he made those comments, it was still less than 24 hours after he announced it in the first place.
Yeah.
But, like, you know, put it this way, I do feel like a lot of coaches in the Big Ten, and I'm not saying I know this for certain that this didn't happen, but I don't believe it to have happened. I think a lot of coaches in the Big Ten would have spoken to Matt Painter before this went down. Juwan Howard, I don't think he gives a shit about talking to Matt Painter before taking Nojel Eastern, personally.
To be fair to Juwan Howard, I don't think he would care if someone called him before they recruited David DeJulius out of the transfer portal.
I would agree with that.
So I don't think it's
I would definitely agree with that.
Malicious thing. I think he just doesn't look at it like that, probably because he's not been like a lifer college basketball coach who has these weird ideas about transfers in the conference, right? I don't think Juwan Howard ever go on the radio and blast kids who are leaving his team. So
no,
it's all kind of, I think they probably look at transfers very differently and through a different lens, just based on their experiences. You agree with that?
I certainly do. I certainly do. I would love to be a fly on the wall when that conversation does happen. I'm not saying I think Matt Painter's going to yell at Juwan Howard. I think it'll be perfectly amicable, but it'll just be really interesting, is all. I don't know. What else do we have? Do we have anything else on this?
So Michigan's 2 transfers in, both from Chicago.
Yeah.
Thought it was interesting that
fair.
Michigan didn't land a Chicago kid in the 2020 class, but did kind of lean on some of those connections to get in the door with transfers, which feels at least a little notable given just we're still trying to figure out where Juwan looks for recruiting.
Yeah, he can go the route of Penn State, which just seems to try to find Philadelphia kids who want to get relatively close back to home when they transfer. And Penn State sells them on that and then enjoys their services. Michigan can do that with Chicago. It's not a bad little deal.
There you go.
So one open scholarship, right?
Mm-hmm.
What would be your guess?
My guess, or what I would do if I was...
Both.
The way that Michigan's operating seems like it's just, I don't think that it's a concern of we want to sit out a guy we're trying to build for the future. It seems like getting the most talent in for the roster at hand, just based on who's been recruited, prioritized, everything else. So I wouldn't be surprised to see another transfer in. I mean, at this point, why not, right? I don't think that Nojel Eastern means you can't take really anyone else to recruiting, and might mean you're less likely to land them.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, an ideal transfer would be someone with more than 1 year of eligibility, frankly, whether you can get him a waiver or not.
Yeah, and I also think a sit-out kid makes so much more sense with 2+ years of eligibility, because
yes.
I think we talked about this in another pod, but you're spending a whole year developing them. If you're only getting 1 year, is it really worth it?
Yep.
A sit one, play one just doesn't make a ton of sense.
I totally agree.
I'd rather just roll out the ball and say, let's get it this year and see what you got. And if there's probably not going to be a lot of great sophomores or freshmen leaving their schools at this point in time, you would think. So
yeah, I wouldn't think so. I would wait. If I were Michigan, I would hold that scholarship at this point until draft decision date and see if that creates any roster flux of, frankly, you may have guys who decide to come back to school and transfer. That has happened. You may also have guys who see a person coming back and then they decide to leave. So I would wait until that date, see if anything comes available, and then you also have that in the pocket just in case there's a reclass kid that pops up that you're interested in. I wouldn't burn it right now on like the guys that we were talking about earlier today, Chaundi, Coleman Lands. Like I think that kind of eliminates those options. Or if it were me making the decisions, it would. I would sit on the scholarship for now.
If Eastern can play this year, he really allows you to say, all right, Eli Brooks, you're just going to be that shooting two guard that Coleman Lands might be brought in. The other option would be bring in Coleman Lands and Eli Brooks try to be a point guard, right? So those are, I think it gives you a lot. Like if Eastern can play this year, he does give you some lineup combinations that are more versatile and effective than you had without him. So the reclass is interesting because it's going to end up being actually easier to reclass instead of harder based on the COVID-19 and all that. So you don't need a test score to qualify as a reclassification, which could lead to a lot of kids trying to cram in their credits this summer somehow and entering early. And Michigan could be in the mix for those kids. That's always an option to have.
So you think that circumstances might make it easier to reclass?
That's what, you don't need a test score. So
what about having enough classes?
Well, yeah, you have to get the classes. But before you had to get the classes and pass your SAT. Now, if you just have your core credits, the NCAA will blanket clear you.
Okay. Well,
so most of those kids haven't taken.
Yeah, on that I'm not sure on if this is going to be easier or harder or whatever, but I do know it's just based on history. There's probably going to be a couple guys who jump up, and you want to be in position right, to use that cliche.
The other problem though is you are waiting on Isaiah Livers' decision. Yeah. If you knew Isaiah Livers was staying in the draft, you would absolutely take Chaundi Brown because
no doubt
you need to fill out that part of your rotation. So always going to be moving pieces and not going to slow down anytime soon.
Yeah.
I mean, this Nojel Eastern thing happened in 48 hours.
We'll probably be podcasting at like 9 a.m. tomorrow with something that breaks at midnight tonight.
Got to see if Juwan Howard calls tonight. Never know what'll go down.
Okay. I think that's it. I think we're good, right?
Yep. Quick little pod to...
Quick little 40-minute pod.
Completely worthless pod.
Well, we hope you all enjoyed this one. If you did, please leave us a review in the iTunes store. And more importantly, the reason that this podcast is free is because we use it to supplement our coverage at both of the places that we make money on. That is The Athletic, where I work. That is UM Hoops, which Dylan owns and operates and does a wonderful job with. So please subscribe to both of those. And have yourself a good night, and we'll probably talk to you tomorrow. See ya.